This is Wes Seidman. He's graciously donating his time to come by our Sanken Chromatic Series microphone booth to talk about microphones today. Wes, tell us about some of the microphones you have in your arsenal from Sanken.
Primarily the 100Ks and the 51s, and then occasionally using the 55s also.
All right. And what kind of work have you been doing lately? What kind of projects?
Everything from orchestras, Brian Wilson, bunch of new artists, old artists, everything in between.
Primarily at which studio?
United mostly. Yeah.
United, yeah, the venerable United.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a historic place.
Very.
You would think you'd only want to use historic microphones there.
Nah, the new microphones do something the old ones don't.
Yeah, that's not. So what are you using the 100Ks on as an example?
The 100Ks I've used a few different ways. I've had them on drum overheads. I've had them as room mics for orchestras. But then recently I've also been using them just as expansion of the room. That, not so much for the sound, but for the air.
Right.
And it
Right.
really can take any source and make it more three-dimensional.
And how about the 51s? I know you've spent a lot of time experimenting with that.
Yeah, primarily I use it on vocals. Been using a lot of shootouts with that versus all 47s, 251s, so forth. And more in the blind test, people are picking the 51 because it captures the source the way you want it. It's very flattering, but it's also forgiving on a lot of singers. Don't have to use compression as much. It just captures it differently.
You think the lack of proximity effect has something to do with that?
Yeah, and also the dual capsule. You really get a really nice high end that you typically get with a tube mic, and to not have to worry about tube supplies picking up RF. It's a lot more useful, and everyone sounds the same.
Right. And how important is the off-axis response?
It is, because any leakage you're going to have has to sound good, and also the lack of how much you're getting. I did a thing at Capitol with Brian Wilson, and we were using 55s, and everyone's within a few feet, and it was pretty amazing the rejection I got of every, another guitar player or accordion 4 feet away, and it sounded pretty much like it was mic'd only with that.
Have you used anything dynamic, any of the mics on drums or something?
The 51 on some percussion,
Yeah.
some timpani. I haven't really found anything it doesn't work on. The 55 currently is my favorite trombone mic. Yeah, you put it on and you get everything you want, and you get the smoothness of like what a ribbon would do, so you don't get that splatting that you typically will get with a condenser. Don't get that, you put it up and it's like, okay, that's what I want it to sound like. A lot less EQ.
Yeah. So overall, do you find yourself processing less?
Yes. Yeah, on vocals, definitely compressing maybe half.
Wow.
I don't need to add the high end. It's just a much more flattering mic. It picks things up the way they are, and if I want to change it later, then I can do whatever I want later. The artist doesn't hear what they need to hear, they're going to play differently. If you can put something up that's going to get what you need captured, the artist isn't going to be affected from, some microphones, they may dull the top end, and on some singers, they're pushing a certain way to achieve that. If they're not hearing it, they're going to overperform, or in some cases underperform.
And it's been said it's sort of a lost art of singers working a microphone.
It is, but again, with the 51, because I've dealt with that when we had the earlier mic, it's really forgiving with singers that don't do that. Where a lot of mics will become harsh, it in a weird way just kind of dissipates it and like smooths it out.
Wow.
In a really nice way.
What are the types of instruments, what are the types of sounds you're thinking of that make you want to say, I think I'll grab a Sanken?
Mostly things where I want to capture what it sounds like and have dimension. It's like there's a lot of mics that sound really good, but they're very two-dimensional. Like I used the 100K on a string dulcimer, and I believe it was on Dean Parks, and he came in and he said, it sounds like I'm sitting in the chair. That's the goal, to make the player go, yeah, that's what I sound like. But what I've also experimented with is using it as just for a vocal mic, going a little close, having to baff a little bit because it is so omni, but you can make it sound like we're talking, go in the control room, and it sounds the same. You know what I mean? Especially on sessions where you have to go on lower sample rates, it almost compensates for the Nyquist filters a little bit. You know what I mean? So you don't notice that you're at the lower sample rate. It's that error where, like I said, using them as kind of like just the natural reverb of something I can't add later because it's not there. But if I have it, I can always take it away.
What have you tried on acoustic guitar?
I've used the 51 on acoustic recently, in a studio where I had a GML mic free, no EQ, and it was flat, and I didn't need anything else. It's also awesome on banjo.
Yeah?
Yeah, my new banjo mic. You get the body of it and the attack and the sustain without it sounding like you're miking it. It sounds like you're in front of it.
Doesn't sound so boinky.
It makes it so you're like, I can push it up a little louder in the mix. Drum overheads.
Drum overheads, right?
Yeah, on the Brian Wilson record, we used it on Keltner for overheads, where he's playing really soft. The nuances, it sounded like you were sitting at the kit.
Right.
Which is always the goal of the engineer.
Well, that's sort of a high frequency reach that microphone has.
It does, yeah. Especially when we're jazzing where there's brushes, it captures without having to gain up the pre's so you don't get all the extra noise. To have the detail without having to work to get it is ideal.
How about grand piano?
Actually, I've used the 100Ks for a mono classical piano, and I've also used it as room mics. Make it very three-dimensional, and because it's so flat, even when they're playing in the higher register, it doesn't jump out. It's very smooth.
That's unique.
Yeah.
That's unique. Otherwise, you'd have to do what?
EQ, compression.
More stuff.
Rides, a lot less rides now.
Yeah, a lot less work.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
So now you concentrate on
the music.
Imagine that.
Performance.
Imagine that. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
That's great.